Nafaa, why should people listen to this episode today?
Have you ever thought about how can I actually use AI? Is it actually impacting me? And just those questions and uncertainties. We're going to be talking about those during this episode, and this is going to be the episode for you.
Hi, and welcome to Serenity Now, a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions, learn, get connected, and be inspired. Join us as we talk about all things business and the search for the ever-elusive Serenity Now in both business and personal life.
Welcome to another episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs. We have a very special guest today that we're excited to share some insight on with regards to AI or artificial intelligence. So before we go any further, I'm going to introduce myself, Rita Kim. I'll be your co-host today. And with me today, I've got my co-host, Candice. Welcome, Candice. Hey. And now on to our special guest. His name is Nafaa Haddou. He's a founder of Terra Labs. Actually, I think he's a serial entrepreneur. We'll let him share a little bit more on that, but he's an expert in many different areas, including digital innovation. So thanks for joining us, Nafaa. Welcome.
Hey, Rita. Hey, Candice. Thank you very much for having me on here. I'm super excited to chat and learn and share a bit more with you. As mentioned, my name is Nafaa Haddou. I am the founder and CEO of Terra Labs. And specifically what we're doing nowadays is looking to protect our communities. And how we do that is going to be the topic for today. We leverage AI. So I'm excited to share about our journey and some of the base understanding, the applications that you now see in the workforce. But more importantly, for us, it's ensuring that we're out there and we're protecting these communities by providing early detection analytics and helping support the agencies that really make a difference in protecting yourselves, your communities, and your homes.
Perfect. Beautiful. Thanks so much. And I guess I'll start us off. Today, we're going to talk about the big wide world of AI and maybe try to get across some of the basic understandings and maybe ask the questions that you might want to ask but are too afraid to ask. So we're going to go basics here. And so let's start with the basics. Nafaa, AI, that term just gets thrown out a lot and maybe more than it needs to, but in simple terms, let's break it down. Off to you.
All right. So the dictionary definition from the Oxford Dictionary is artificial intelligence is the theory and development of computer systems that are able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. Since we've started working with computers, we've always had this thought of, can we get it to think like us, act like us, and effectively computate like us? And that's what really artificial intelligence is. It's basically, rather than ones and zeros plus a negative multiplication, it's really trying to create a system and these interactions that if you were to put yourself behind a screen and you were interacting and chatting with it, you would not be able to tell the difference between, is it me or is it another entity, another sapient or alive figure?
Am I aging myself that I just thought of the Wizard of Oz there?
Absolutely.
I guess you'd be double aging us then. Oh, geez.
But it's that thing. It's these tools, and the biggest impact is that we are now in a generation and an era of information. And with access to information, with access to more and more condensed hardware, which is actually allowing us this acceleration, we're getting closer toward it. We're speaking about AI now, but we're still a very long ways away from the sci-fi that we always hear about. We're getting closer, but there's still boundaries because ultimately we are trying to emulate the way that you think. And a lot of times we just think it's like we're binary, but our brain operates every breath, every movement, heating, subsystems. There's so many different things that are happening organically in human intelligence that if we were to get to that point, we'd also have to replicate in a computer system in silica.
That sounds massive.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's what that pause is. That sounds massive.
We told you, Nafaa, don't take it too far, okay? So let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Okay, so I'm going to go to another definition, something called AGI. Come on,
Yeah.
what's AGI?
Aggie, yeah. Aggie is the true AI that we imagine when we think sci-fi. AGI is artificial general intelligence. So those are the systems that, like, it is another entity. It is a person. It is your coworker at that point. And it's
Like
self-teaching.
Data from Star Trek, right?
Yes, that's right. That's what
Exactly.
I was thinking too. See? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. We got to bring it to real life for us. I was like, when is Data coming into the picture here?
And it is. It's Data from Star Trek. It's the thought where it's self-learning, self-thinking, self-operating without instruction, prompt, or direction from us as an operator.
Now I'm wondering, okay, so this is great, but everyday things that we're using that maybe we don't realize are like the current version of AI, not AGI, I guess.
You're doing events, right? So the photos that you take, the camera processing that you take,
I haven't taken any photos yet, so events is kind of like my weekend side gig. I'm actually in accounting, so
Okay. So,
and I have just done huge technology upgrades to my whole system, so I'm sure there's a whole lot of AI there that I'm not really aware of. So
absolutely. So one of the things that we kind of have to set some base about, like, how it works in the day-to-day is, where does it really impact us in terms of AI? Automation, processes, information. That's where it really comes and starts seeing benefit. Before you have AI, the core thing that you need is you need data. You need the information. And with the day and age that we are, the information age, we have data on everything, who we are, people, the numerical ones and zeros that are in our Excel tables day to day. Previously, before you were starting to use the AI, you have data analytics, right? So you've probably done your visualizations. You've looked and sat in front of your computer and be like, okay, that make a connection here. This is the correlation. This is causation, etc. And so what AI nowadays is doing, and you probably will see it, is that you're seeing faster automation and collation of this data, this aggregation, right? This analytics, rather than you having to sit there and be like, hey, I've got 15 different Excel files and they all have bits and pieces of information. I just need these keywords come through these search algorithms or these pipelines that come into it to provide me with the information I'm going to output. So we've used the processes, the capacities, the things that AI is really built on concurrently through the stages. The only thing that is changing nowadays is we're having an interface that does a lot of that background knowledge, that those processes and sub-thinking and aspects that we think about behind the scenes. And that's where we start getting to what is an LLM and like neural networks and regressions and machine learning. And you'll probably hear those terms if you ever really explore it. But that's the differentiation. Like, how is it actually processing that information? What is the biases that are being used?
Got it. So I think because we got somewhat educated earlier with Nafaa, not that I'm not claiming to be any type of an expert here, but you told us a little bit about vector math. And so that's what you were just referring to in terms of understanding and processing lots of data and seeing the patterns and recognition a lot faster than perhaps right now sometimes we can do if you're looking at 15 spreadsheets as one person. And then you're moving on and you said some acronyms. So now you're going to have to go ahead and break those down. You know what's going to happen. You said LLMs.
Yeah. What is an LLM? LLM is large language model. That is, when we think ChatGPT, when we think everything that's been going through, that's what LLMs are.
So LLM, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Got it.
Right. And basically what LLMs are is that they work on language. So we were talking about using a lot of data and that data that we get is in the form of language. It's in the form of words and the various informations. So we pile in, let's say we jumble all this into a big bucket and big hat and give it a little bit of structure. But this is where vector math kind of comes in. It's, hey, I now have aunt near uncle, but it's also associated with brother and sister. And you have these in a 3-dimensional space, right? When we ask an LLM a question, it's basically going to take those keywords that you're using is like, how is a brother related to an aunt? And it's going to basically build the math being like, oh, in 3 dimensions, the most association is your aunt's brother, or your aunt's is associated to via sister, right? And that's how these prompts and how we use language and tokens to take natural interactions that we're used to and turn it into a mathematical equation that outputs a tangible input, understanding, correlation that we can see.
Okay, you're starting to talk a little bit of our language now, because Candace and I are both logic people, and and she's a crazy math person. I'm not the crazy math person at the level she is, but we understand what you're saying now when it comes to that. So thanks for explaining it in those terms. I appreciate it. So we talked a little bit about the definition of AI, then we moved to AGI, then we learned about vector math. Can you believe you learned all this in one session? And then we moved into LLMs, large language models, and then we moved into nice real life examples. We talked about data from Star Trek, in case you forgot. We talked about ChatGPT, which I think or ChatGPT, sorry, a lot of people are potentially now using. But now let's kind of bring it back into business. How do we use AI in business? Maybe first timer, or maybe we're already using it. Let's go back to that.
So let's go through a bit of history of technology in business. And I always like to to go through about the 1980s, we started seeing computation computers. The term computers actually came from NASA, where they actually had departments of well-educated ladies go through, and they I
saw that. It's a Disney show.
There is a Disney movie about it. Hidden Knowledge. Great show to watch.
Yeah,
right?
Great show.
But they were computers, right? That's what they were doing. They were computating by hand all of this information. And then we had the first IBM machines come through. And now we're able to take data and process it quicker. And then we get into, now we can process data and we can turn it into something that interacts with the real world through robotization. So you have the manufacturing and the automation of the assembly firm. And then we transition into more of like the digital.com era, where now it's about the information that we get and how do we take information and turn it into something tangible. So we're creating these pipelines for tangible information that impact us and give us organic intelligence. I'll use that organic intelligence, the digested areas to act upon. And now we're getting into the phase of AI where we have these automation pipelines. We have all of this data, but it's more than we can process intuitively. And AI is that stage of like helping us even further refine the tangible information that we need to act on, rather than us looking at a database that has 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 1 billion data points. We're getting it down to the 5 core things that we asked for, that we can see and we can act upon it and use to respond.
Got it. I think earlier in the conversation, I really like the history lesson, by the way, that helps me with my learning. You mentioned the word prompt, and I'm not sure if our listeners caught it or if they already know it, or I'm just the old one on the call, but why don't you help us now move into that? Because I think that's what you're going to walk into shortly.
It is.
My understanding that this is the big key thing, right? You need to know how to prompt the LLM so that you get what you want from it, right?
So what are the 3 things that we really taken through here, if anything, and understanding why prompts are important? It's the vector math, the tokenization, and identifying data patterns. A prompt is basically your instructions. That's what it is. You're prompting this AI system to do something for you. If you were to ask your coworker, what is, like, I need this report done? Well, you ask them just that. Well, what report? What information? Where is it going through? If they don't intuitively know it, I will say this right now, AI and machine learning is very dumb. It is not smart. We think it's smart, but it's not. We have to give it the smartness, and by the smartness is how we prompt it. Why is vector math important? Remember how we were saying about associations? We are looking at aunt, uncle, brother, sister. How is aunt related to it? If we don't set the prompt to look at aunt from the paternal side, then we might get something completely different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you might get the maternal side. You might get something else. Yes.
Exactly. So what does this lead into a prompt? If I asked an AI to write me a report, well, it's just going to look at the word report, right? And there's a connection that they need to put information here. It is going to feed you intelligible information, but because of the way it's trained, it'll put it into sentence structures, but it's not going to have any impact to it. But if I asked it, I want you to act as a business analyst with 15 years of experience. You've now set it within the database and within its vectors to correlate age, experience, type of role, etc. And then you're going to define it. It's like write a report on cybersecurity. Now it's going to have these references, these vectors. And as it starts pulling information, as it starts looking at these different parameters and data points, it's going to be able to cognitate it and compute it into something that's related and is in relation to it all. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Right? So
I think we're still following you, which is surprising. So I think we're still working with you here. And so then you use the word tokenization and you use the word vector. So I'm going to get you to just quickly make sure that's defined first. And then I have another question unless Candice wants to jump in.
So token is effectively before any of the information goes through, and this is specifically LLMs that we're really talking about, but the word is given a weighting, it's given a score, and it's tokenized. So rather than a word, it's fragments, correlations. It's hard to simplify to something, but effectively we're going to take the word aunt, uncle, and brother, and they are, to the AI, not going to be looking at the word aunt. It's going to be looking at a frame, token, a place marker of what aunt is, what brother is, what sister is, so on and so forth. And those tokens are what are in the database, effectively. That's being what's correlated.
Kind of like a definition of the word to the computer?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that is a really amazing way to put it. It is the definition that the computer, the algorithm is using.
Thought you couldn't educate us, Nafaa. Look at this.
Sometimes I get too ahead of myself.
So this is the language learning thing. Part of it is, this is the token for aunt, this is the token for uncle, this is the token for
exactly
brother.
Right.
So then when it comes across those words in spoken language, it has this pre-definition, I guess.
Effectively, right.
Okay, I got it. All right.
This is good. Okay, so then you used another word. Vector.
Yes. So vector is a mathematical term. So if I am looking in 3-dimensional space, it is basically the direction of the XYZ coordinate.
Algebra.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
But there is something that's important to note is that you'll have a vector to aunt, you'll have a vector to brother, you'll have a vector to sister, but it's the sum of those vectors that's being used to compute where in relation or where that token is actually in association, and that token is what's pulled out.
Kind of like a Venn diagram, only 3D.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they intersect is where, okay.
Then this would then bring out the next thing is bias. So if I am prompting or putting in information to help the system, if I have it wrong, or if I didn't correctly prompt or put in the correct information, that's where things can go funky.
There's that level, but even when you're setting up the AI, the language models, the neural nets, all these MLs, the data pipelines, all of that, you can start introducing bias, and it's incrementally impacts all the way up to the interface level. And that's where that's where we're interacting with it, and we're asking questions, we're putting in prompts, etc. So what does that mean? If I take information that is solely focused on startups in Edmonton and their accounting practices, and I use that to train a model, and then I ask it to give me information on startups in Silicon Valley, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, there's a bias because you have only the data from Edmonton at this point in time. And how does that work effectively? I mean, we got issues with country. We've got issues when it comes to time zone. We've got issues with the type of businesses that are in Silicon Valley versus Edmonton. So yes, layers.
Right. And it just adds up layers. So biases can be introduced. So there's even human at the coding level that can introduce bias. So talking about like data pipelines, and data pipelines are basically how we feed data. It's literally think pipeline, and all you're feeding, you're pushing through is data, but you have to build those connections. Effectively, you're asking and querying the database to give you specific info. But if a developer is told, hey, I want information on businesses in Canada, and he doesn't know that and the information that he has is provinces, and he doesn't know that Northwest Territories are part of Canada. Now he's built this pipeline and it's completely excluded information about Northwest Territories, which might not impact it, sure, but it may as well, because you're missing that information. The data is not clean.
Yeah, or accidentally included Alaska because it looks like it should be Canada, but it isn't.
Exactly. So these biases.
See, we're actually having fun now. We didn't think this was going to happen, guys. That's why we're laughing.
It can be very impactful that these biases introduced from the human perspective, even how we ask information, how we interpret information, and the patterns and what we're asking for when we're building these LLMs, we're prompting these LLMs, we can introduce our own biases because we just don't know. Right. And that's where it's like early at the very beginning, I was saying like, we're still a long ways away from creating this. And AGI, it's this impact of we are generating something that is going to have our own biases. And we as humans are not pure computational machines either.
With my little forays into using ChatGPT, there's this place where I can indicate that my questions are from this perspective. I'm an accountant with X number of years of experience. You were talking about that, so that I don't have to rewrite that into every single prompt. Is that I'm guessing that's the purpose of that, so that it's already vectoring where my answers are going to come from because I'm an accountant with X number of years of experience.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
And when creating your prompts, there's various factors that come through and provide information, but it's at its core, it's one, you have to set the tone. And the tone is, where am I looking? What is this role? And if you can give it a bit more information or as detailed as you can, the better off it's going to be in terms of providing info. 2 is the action. What are you expecting it to do? And then 3 is the context to that action. So with this detail, with this information, from this perspective, etc. And the 4th one is if you have pre-existing info or pre-existing prompt or pre-existing data that you can add to it, I would also include that and use the following info.
There was a bunch of other questions I wanted to ask, but I wanted to get to the quick topic of, okay, we've got some definitions, some understandings. We've learned some math. We talked about Star Trek and the Wizard of Oz. And we also want to talk a little bit about what's some practical applications that, let's say we have a business that's growing and trying to scale. I'm trying to give you some vectors now. We're maybe located in Alberta and maybe we're like in energy. Actually, no, let's make it simpler. Let's manufacturing and we're doing widgets. So can you help me? Like, how would I bring in, what are some real life examples of supporting this company? What's some quick things that we can reach out to and say, here's a couple of things that you can look at?
Amazing. The first one is generate a list of initial outlines of customer personas and like the types and the roles of people that I should reach out to. So you're going to get titles. You're going to get maybe a bit of a blurb. You might get a name like a customer persona. And then you can take that info and look at it and read through and be like, is this relevant? Is this accurate? Let me go find a Janet that works in oil and gas and needs widgets, and let's chat with them. Let's refine this. You've got a strong prompt that comes through. It could be that I have 15 spreadsheets of singular data points in regards to operational efficiencies. And I just need to see, is there a pattern, right? I can ask an AI, feed the Excel spreadsheet into ChatGPT and is like, based on this information, identify any significant, give it some various parameters, patterns that stand out, and it'll pop into those and then you can go in there and
right, energy efficiency, usage, something like that, right?
Exactly. From a content marketing perspective, you can help it generate not the content. Do not want it to generate the content, because after enough times you'll know when it's generated. But the outlines, the prompts, generate a snippet to kind of get past that writer's block. You can have it take information and be like, say, for example, you've done a brainstorm and you have all these different ideas and you want it condensed into a report or into an outline or into kind of a digestible format and put it all together, right? Combine the notes, find associations and references.
Yeah, we use that with a few of the workshops that we've been running in Alberta and BC, and we use it to take some of the survey feedback and just summarize it for us, and then certain categories, and allow us to work on certain things that we needed to do for improvements, and or also feedback to funders as to what works and what isn't working, and and it was working, and we asked for more money. There you go. So that supported that. So.
And then using the manufacturing example from a more technical perspective and building these systems, it could be health and safety. Your security cameras are placed. Are people tracking through and checking in? Are there areas that they're going through that are hazardous, or there's a hazard detection? From the manufacturing could be quality assurance, using lasers and cameras to assess for the quality and ensuring that it reaches a certain percentage, or it's identifying any breaches or breakdowns in the production facility before they're going to occur, right? Based on the outputs. So where you have, effectively to summarize, where you have data, you can leverage AI. And where you need to summarize and find and identify patterns, you can leverage AI.
I think you just solved a problem for me. So I have timesheets, right, for my team. And we're going through this process of identifying major tasks and trying to rejig people's job descriptions. So from what you've said, I could take the timesheets with the major task code and their notes of specifically what they've done and get that to synthesize into tasks.
Yeah. And you can generate a prompt being like, hey, I would like you to synthesize or summarize based on the tasks. If you have it already labeled for each of the employees that's listed in this column, and it'll go through and put all of that together.
Interesting. Yeah, because the task code that they're using may not necessarily be the correct task code, but the notes indicate more what they've been doing. So, yeah.
So meant for notes, but you can associate it to the individual, to the employee themselves. So the employee, summarize their tasks based on their notes and task codes, etc. You could ask it to generate a job description based on what those outputs are.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't really want it associated with the employee, but with the role, so that because we want to redefine the roles.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. I'm very excited now. I've got all sorts of geeky stuff to do
later. I guess we're getting close to that time, right? Where we actually are weirdly having fun with this. I did not expect this. And I did want to talk about fear of AI. And I did want to get into some of that kind of stuff, because there's the other side of it as well, right, guys? But we can maybe do that in a different episode and bring you back, Nafaa. So far, we've had an incredible conversation. I think we've learned a lot of pieces, got some good definitions understood. Was there any final thing you wanted to quickly mention before we go into our quick fire, Nafaa?
In terms of AI, when you are looking to work with it, it's not in a position to replace yourself, but it is in a position to benefit you and help you overcome some of those initial hurdles and those areas in which you need a lot of information condensed into something that you can act upon. When you're looking at it as a tool, you need to look at it as a tool that's going to be able to synthesize actionable information for you, but you have to be able to ask the right question and provide that information, or make sure it has access to it. Without any of that together, you're not going to be pointed in the right direction.
Got it. So in our quick fire, we just quickly go around and share any kind of quick learnings or any final questions that we might have. I'll toss it over to Candace here.
So as accountants, we're often reminded of the ethics side of AI, which we didn't really get a chance to go into, but there's a lot of work being done in this. So I just wanted to throw that little precautionary. It is good to pay attention to what you should and shouldn't do. There's lots of information out there. Lots of people are doing good work. So I think that's maybe just the piece that I wanted to throw into there, so that people aren't, running amok using AI on their own. So
yeah. And it's a good point, and I'll mention it, but there are certain LLM models, Llama as an example, where you can set it up on your computer and run everything locally, and it is not exposed to the internet or using any training. You can do similar things with more of the enterprise solutions for Genesis by Google, Claude by Anthropic, ChatGPT by OpenAI. So there are options, but before you get and start putting confidential information into there, always check with your privacy policies and your employee policies, and definitely check what your settings are and configurations are for your systems, both AI and internal.
That's good advice.
It's kind of a way for us to empower ourselves and our staff, not replace us. And I think that's one thing to may alleviate a little bit of fear that could be out there of like, oh no, job security, am I out of here? But like you said, we're not there yet. We're not at data yet. So I think the other thing is, for once in my life, I can say, Nafaa, you made me feel a little more open to AI as a tool that we can use and shape and make it right for us. Maybe not fear as much, but you brought math into it, so you made us happy. So thank you for doing that. And thanks for sharing your insights. And for our listeners, I really hope that this episode maybe gave you a couple of laughs and you realize that we're asking probably the same questions you might be asking. You're likely all smarter than us. We know that. But maybe if this has helped you, we're hoping to see if maybe you could share this episode and see if it can bring a little serenity now to yourself or to some entrepreneurs you know. Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you so much, Nafaa. Appreciate this was a fun journey that we had together.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur you know some serenity now.